Hey folks, welcome back to the Broken Meeple. I'm Luke Hector, and this is Cthulhu. Nah, don't worry. It's not quite Cthulhu. It's Cthulhu Dice Bag, though, and it's just a quick little snippet at the beginning of this video that I recently acquired one of these from a very charming girl called the Dice Bag Lady, who you can find on Twitter and Facebook really easily. She was also at the UK Games Expo. Didn't get a chance to meet her in person, which is a shame, but I've been chatting to her online, and she seems very nice. But she's very talented at knitting these little dice bags here. This is her Cthulhu one, so you've got all the little tentacles and everything. But she can do any stuff made to order, so things like, space. She's been doing Space Hulk and like Warhammer 40k related stuff lately. But she can pretty much custom make any logo that you feel like onto a dice bag. And Cthulhu here is going to be my little dice bag for Marvel Dice Masters, because those sick bags you get in the box are horrendous. And he's also going to be my monster cup for when I play Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror. So it's a nice little gimmick there. But for now, sorry Cthulhu, this is not about Arkham Horror or your Mythos, this is about superheroes, so bye bye. Hopefully you won't smite me later for that one. Anyway, this review is on Sentinels and the Multiverse Vengeance. Now, just a bit of background, Sentinels Multiverse is a superhero co-op game where each of you has your own superhero as a deck, and you will work together to beat the villain and in the corresponding environment that you've got. The villain has its own deck, the environment has its own deck. Plays very quickly, it's very simple, but it's very thematic, one of my favourite games in my collection, and if you want a good superhero game, this is one that you must have in your collection. Now, it started off with the Enhanced Edition base game. Well, oh wait, there was one before that, but you ignore that. Get the Enhanced Edition. But the Enhanced Edition base game, which gave you a good selection of heroes, good selection of basic villains, and got you effectively the basics to play the game with. Then after that, there was Rook City and Infernal Relics, which originally were sold separately, but in the enhanced version now we've got this sort of double box, which brings in again more heroes, more villains, a couple of different mechanics. But it was a brilliant expansion because it added so much new stuff to the game, and with these two you're pretty much set for life. But I'm a completionist, so there's more to come. Then we had Shattered Timelines, which was a very interesting expansion actually. It didn't give you a great amount of heroes and villains, but it gave you some really quality ones, because this one messed around with timelines and chronological stuff. And so you had like heroes, you had like the Chrono Ranger and a futuristic Omnitron X, which were okay, but they're not my favourite heroes of all time. But this one had some of the best villains that I've fought. The Dreamer in particular. I've had such a fun game playing against her. This little sort of 10-year-old child who's dreaming, and all these manifestations of her dreams are coming to life and attacking everyone. And you have to kill all the manifestations and wake the child up without killing her. Because if you accidentally kill the child, you lose. So it's a nice little addition to the game where you can't just suddenly area of effect everything, boom, because you'll nuke the child while you're at it. But it was a really good expansion. Oh yeah, and it also boasts one of the hardest villains ever in this entire legacy of Sentinels in the Multiverse, which is, funny enough, Iron Legacy, who is just an absolute tank. Beating Iron Legacy is worthy of a medal. He is that hard, but he's very entertaining, very thematic. But now, there's nothing in there, don't worry, it's an empty box. But now we've got Sentinels and the Multiverse Vengeance, recently released in February. This one brought in, again, new heroes and villains, but it brought in a different little gimmick where normally you were only fighting against one villain. This one brings in a mechanic where you actually fight against a team of 5 villains. That's because originally the Freedom Five, I think they were called, were 5 superheroes that banged together to defeat evil, but particularly Baron Blade. Baron Blade is now back in this one with his new serum, making him really sort of beefed up and nasty. But he's brought his own team of people who are all designed to sort of contrast the Freedom Five. So they're similar to them, but they play on their sort of polar opposites, if you see what I mean. But is this expansion worth getting if you've got the rest? Is it worth getting at all? And is the 5v5 a decent gimmick? Or is it merely just a gimmick that you can ignore? Let's find out more. Okay, so first off, we're just going to take a quick look at the various heroes and villains that you get in this game. So we'll start off with the easier ones first, which are, to start with, miles away from the camera, I don't know what I'm doing, Knife. The Knife stands for the Kinetic Neutralizer Yielding Flawless Execution. It's a bit of a mouthful, so just call her Knife. She's a very basic hero. She's pretty much... She kind of reminds me of Samus, or a kind of female version. Samus being the sort of lady in a suit from the old Nintendo games. You can see her on like Super Smash Bros. For example. Also, she's kind of like a female Metal Gear Solid, sort of special ops, that kind of thing. She's a fairly generic character. She goes around with sort of like these like energy wielding knives and blades and stuff like that, and is generally a direct damage dealing hero. So she's a very good one for beginners to pick up. But, you know, she's not one that you're going to be getting like obscene, like funky combos with. She's a fairly... I don't want to... She's not one of my favourite heroes, mainly because she is more simplistic. But I do like using her in squads. She is quite powerful, and she is a great one for people to pick up when they're new. So for cards that she's got there, for example, you know, she deals a lot of energy damage. So she, you know, whereas cards she's got Amplified Combatant, Prototype Servo Gauntlets, you know, Kinetic Neutralizer. So she's got all these weird sort of funky bits of equipment, kind of like a sort of like cyber version of the Wraith in a sense. And you know, she's just generally go in there, dish out the damage, and Bob's your uncle. Then we move on to Parse, or Parse. Parse, I'm not entirely certain the exact pronunciation of that. Parse is effectively Hawkeye from the Avengers. There's not really many other ways to put it. So she is the archer in the group, and her special ability, so she can do a little bit of direct damage, but not a ton. But what she's very good is spotting weak points in the enemy. So she has a lot of things that either involve sort of manipulating the villain deck, or, you know, exploiting, you know, giving your other teammates an advantage. So this is very much a support character. Not one that you're going to take on the enemy by yourself, but you're going to be able to support your team, whether by giving them a little bit of extra damage, you know, like increasing their damage when you land a bullseye on someone, or by manipulating the villain deck so that all the nasties are kept as far away as possible. Very useful character, and I have enjoyed playing her as a support character. You know, not terribly difficult to use, but just bear in mind that you're not playing this character if you're going for direct damage or anything like that. So just looking at some of her cards that she's got there, we've got a segmentation fault, so, you know, spotting a weak point, the chink in the armor effectively, targeting arrow, so various different types of arrows that she can use, syntactic analysis, so again, she's a strategist among everyone, reveal the flaws, critical multiplier. So she likes to discard cards, so she likes to draw cards and discard them, and by discarding them she can do other effects. Critical multiplier being quite a nice one because she can increase the damage dealt by other heroes. So she is a very useful support character, not a direct damage dealer, so bear that in mind when you're playing her. But she's still only, I think, difficulty 1 in this set, so she's not particularly difficult to play and good for newbies as well. So out with you, Parse. Now we come on to another difficulty 2 character. I'll just correct myself now, the Parse is actually a difficulty 2 as well, but she's not particularly difficult to use, so not the kind of the easier end of the two. But the other difficulty 2 character is, now I hope this is the right pronunciation, the Naturalist. Naturalist, whatever you want to pronounce it like. Effectively, this is almost a bit like the sort of shape-shifting druid of the party. I mean, he looks nothing like a druid, but the cool thing with this guy is that his abilities involve him shape-shifting into either a gazelle, a crocodile, or a rhino, depending on what stage of the game you're at or what situation is needed, really. So he can be the gazelle, which is about healing himself and other characters and, you know, just generally trying to stay alive. But he can also turn into a crocodile, where his abilities are more about actually dealing damage, or he can turn into a rhino, where his abilities then, you know, pan off being a tank and soaking up damage. I had a good time with this guy when I used him before, because I manifested myself mainly as a rhino during the game and just became an unbelievable tank, sucking up all the damage and negating half of it so that the teammates could go and dish out all the damage. Again, he's more of a support character, although you can dish out a reasonable amount of damage when you're the crocodile. So he's effectively, you know, a jack of all trades. You can adapt to any situation that the opponent gives you, so it makes him a very flexible and a very enjoyable character. Various stuff that he has, like Bestial Shift. You might notice, let's see if I can get that there. You might notice those little colour symbols there at the left-hand side of the card. They represent the red being the gazelle, the green being the crocodile, and the purple being the rhino. And basically, depending on what form you're in, dictates what ability you use. So again, multiple things on different cards. Going with the same sort of bestial theme, we've got Predator's Eye, we have Environmental Allies, we have Cornered Beast, the new one there, Primal Charge, Blend into the Pack. So these are all very sort of animalistic cards and going along that same bestial changing shifting. Very entertaining character, but needs a little bit more of a sort of experienced player to get the real hang of knowing when to shift forms, because you can do it multiple times during the game, but if you're in the wrong form at the wrong time, your effectiveness is, reduced somewhat. So that's the Naturalist. So now we come on to some of the more obscure heroes, and by obscure I don't just mean that they're harder to use at difficulty 3, but they're also quite strange as well. Starting with Setback. Setback is a weird hero. He undergone medical testing by Baron Blade, and the serum actually worked on him, but he managed to escape. But he's kind of weird. He always ends up in the worst case scenario, and generally bad luck follows him around. And that's his mechanic. He has a pool of tokens which is his unlucky pool, and his abilities play off that. So you generate unlucky tokens effectively, and then you spend those tokens to do various abilities, and he can be quite powerful, but you have to know, you have to get those tokens built up, and then you have to play them at the right time. You can't just waste around. But it's quite amusing that his pictures and stuff in the cards, regard him as being a bit more of a liability than an actual superhero. So to go with him, high risk behavior, the fumbling fool, friendly fire, stuff like that. These really weird cards that go with him. But it is quite amusing to play this guy and look at all these pictures, and he can be useful, but he's going to take a very experienced player to get him to work right, because you need to balance out those unlucky pool tokens and make sure that you use them at the right time. He's quite a fun one to use though. He's not necessarily a favourite of mine in this set, but he's certainly quite a cool one to have around now and again just for a laugh. And now, after the Parse and Naturalist heroes, we come to my favourite heroes in this set. Not necessarily because they're the most powerful, although I have seen them used to very good effect. It's more the fact that they are a very unique way of playing this game. They are called the Sentinels, and the Sentinels have their own little setup card here, much like half of the villains done. Now, why does this hero have more of a complicated setup? Well, that's because if you notice the title, the Sentinels plural, there are actually 4 of these guys. There is Mainstay, the Rife, the Idealist, see her there, and Dr. Medico. These are 4 mini superheroes. They're effectively like a little squad, a little gang, and as such they only have about half the HP, if that, of the big superheroes. So they can die easily, but they all do different things. So one's better with healing, one's better with damage, one's better with support, and they all play off each other, and it's still one player who controls these. And all their abilities relate on, how many of these heroes have you got left that aren't incapacitated, and if particular, some abilities will have extra abilities on the cards, some cards will have extra abilities on them, depending on who's alive. So if Idealist is alive, you get this, and also if the Rife is alive, you get this. So they're very, very cool heroes to use, and I had a friend who's used these to brilliant effort, better than I ever used them for, where he was able to keep my Naturalist tank alive with Dr. Medico and still heal up himself and do some decent damage. They're just really fun to play because you've got to be careful that they don't die easily. But it's cool to have, if you're worried about, I only get to play one superhero this game, fair enough. Well, here you go, play a squad of 4 of them and see how you get on with there. So to go with their ones, we got Telekinetic Wallop, we have Coordinated Assault, we have Sentinel Tactics. So effectively, you can see that this is them working as a squad and, trying to work together to help. Restorative Burst, Aura Vision. So they're very there's a wide variety of different powers that they have, mainly because there's so many of them. And finally, team communication. You know, again, similar style pack tactics, squad tactics, if you will, for these heroes. These are my favourite in the set, and they are really fun to use. They are difficulty free though, so you need to be experienced, but they're just fun. And to be honest, I say experienced, but my friend this was the first time he played the game, and he took them. Granted, he has experience with collectible card games, so this sort of thing isn't quite new to him, so maybe that was an advantage. But no, he did a really good job with these guys, and I just find them really good fun. So my favourite hero of the set, the Sentinels. Now let's move on to the villains. Okay, so moving on to the villains now, we have the original guy. I'm going to use their big cards that you get. You can buy these oversized cards for the original game and expansions separately as a kind of promo thing on online retailers. I seriously suggest you get them. It is much better to use these than the 2 cards, because these ones just stand out more. They're really cool, really nice artwork, and you know, what can I say? But these come default with the game. So there's Baron Blade, his new souped up version with the serum. He is a much tougher hero than he used to be in the original set, although he still pales in comparison to things like Iron Legacy and stuff like that. But the main thing is not because, you know, 32 hit points doesn't sound like much, but that's because you don't fight this guy alone. I mean, it is said that you can fight, it's rumoured that you can fight the villains separately, but you wouldn't do because it would just be too easy. You need to fight them as a team. So with Baron Blade, he's bringing Ermine to the fray. Now, Baron Blade is, as Sentinel fans will know, is the nemesis to Legacy. This one is the nemesis to Wraith. Now, they've all got their own backstories. So, you know, Wraith is effectively like a sort of a jealous thief. You know, a jealous thief. So, you know, very jealous of the Wraith, and naturally, she's a bit more of a con artist. So she is the nemesis to the Wraith, and obviously they do extra damage to each other. But she, rather than doing a lot of damage, she's just sort of really annoying. She comes out with all these various ongoing abilities that either get her out of trouble or mess around with your cards in play and stuff. So yeah, she's basically a slippery little devil, and the Wraith is obviously the one best suited to have a go at her. But you know, this is just Nemesis, so you don't have to use the Wraith. It's just an example. So to go with her, we have Friction. Now, Friction is the nemesis to Tachyon, the speedy sort of athletic runner from the previous set. Friction is pretty similar, you know, she has, you know, super speed and stuff like that, but she also has the element of lightning that she uses for a lot of her abilities, and so lightning is pretty much her type of damage, but she plays in contrast to Tachyon, and mainly, I think it's similar to Ermine actually. She managed to get an intern position working for a particular scientist, Tachyon, you know, Meredith was her real name, but unfortunately her haphazard practices got her effectively fired, so she holds a grudge. So, you know, typical backstory there for a supervillain, but that's Friction. Then we've got possibly the weirdest one in the bunch, and reminds me a bit too much of the horrific Juggernaut in X-Men 3: The Last Stand, but we have Fright Train. So, you know, this is effectively Juggernaut, and this one is nemesis to Bunker. Now, Bunker was the sort of Iron Man parody from the original set. Fright Train is effectively another, you know, corporal platoon officer, but, you know, Bunker got put into the, the suit contract that he had, and he didn't. So, you know, this guy, again, everybody's got a grudge against their arch nemesis. So, you know, these guys are very prone to jealousy. But then aren't most villains, I suppose. But this is your hard hitter. This guy just dishes the damage out. He just comes at you with full force and just beats you to death. He's probably, I think, the hardest one out of the group next to Baron Blade to take out. So, you know, it's worth getting rid of this guy as quickly as possible. But, you know, the others can still be annoying as well. And then finally, we have the weirdest one to pronounce, the Proletariat, something like that. Proletariat I'm going to use. This is effectively sort of like Russian agent type thing, but he is all about cloning. So he will have clones of himself on the battlefield, and you know, you have to get rid of the clones before you can actually kill this guy, and the more clones he has, the more powerful his abilities become. He can potentially be a right nuisance if too many clones come out, so you have to keep him in check. But if you can keep his clones down, he's he's a relative pushover. And he's not overly tough with only 20 hit points, but that's because he's got the clones that you have to take out. So he can be an annoyance, but if you keep him in control, he's not too bad. And finally, just a quick run over of the environment decks that you also get in here. You get 2 more environments to play with. You've got the mobile defense platform, which is effectively like Baron Blade's mobile defense platform. Funny enough, it was just a device in his first incarnation. Now it's an entire location. And this is quite a nasty place to fight. This one, most environments hate the heroes. Some have a mix, but this one just hates the heroes and then beats them up while you're at it. So you've got shield generators, you've got the propulsion systems, you've got turbo lifts, you've got the bridge, you've got the various locations, you've got the mechanics. Oops, sorry. Got the mechanics and like the gunners. This is effectively like fighting on Hydra's base or something. So it's a very thematic battle, but this is going to make your job a lot harder if you go with this one, but it is good fun. The flip side, we have one that is a bit more easier towards the heroes, and you have their actual home base, the Freedom Tower, so effectively hero headquarters. And here you've got ones like, front desk for some reason, like receptionist, the Legacy's landing pad, the Wraith's arsenal, Ironclad maintenance bay, Tachyon's lab. So basically all these locations are rooms that go with particular heroes. And then there's things like, entry point, which allows, where the villains can effectively bust into your area. But, this is a relatively easy environment to manage. So if you're looking for a slightly easier game, use the Freedom Tower, and it tends to work with that. So that's a quick run over of the villains and the heroes and the environments in this expansion. But I suspect you want to know now about the 5 versus 5 gameplay mode. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so that's a general overview of what's in the box itself, but the main appeal of this is the 5 versus 5 mechanic, and I've played several games with this now to see how it runs. Firstly, I can tell you that this is not easy. The 5 villains, when they get bounce off each other, they can get quite nasty and quite powerful. And, you are effectively taking out like nearly 100, well, possibly more, like 100 hit points worth of villains, possibly even more than that. Actually, I think probably close to 110, 120 hit points worth of villains across 5 different villains, and each one is playing its own deck. So each one's flipping its own card, and it can get quite nasty when all 5 of them get together. But then again, you've got 5 superheroes, so you've got a lot of abilities to balance it out too. And the way that it plays is that the villain you'll have Baron Blade and all of them in the line, and then Baron Blade will play his card first, then the first hero gets their turn, then Ermine, for example, gets their turn, and then the second hero gets their turn, then Fright Train, for example, and then the third hero player. So it basically does villain, hero, villain, hero, villain, hero, villain, hero, environment. That's basically in that order, and then rinse and repeat. The gameplay still plays out pretty much like any other Sentinels and Multiverse game, so you play your card, you use a power, but it's just the turn order that is different. But the game does feel very different with 5 versus 5, because when you played with 5 players before, 5 players made the game quite easy. So if you were playing with 5 players, you pretty much went up against level 3 minimum superheroes, and that was for an introduction game really, but you would go up against level 4s really, because 5 superheroes is quite powerful. 4 was the balanced one in my opinion. 3 made it fairly hard. You didn't want to go up against any level 3 or 4 people with that. You wanted to stick to 1 or 2s. And 2 player is, well, I haven't tried many 2 players, but as far as I can tell, it's almost not impossible with half of these villains. So, with 2 players, I use multiple heroes, and that's fine with me. Unless you're trying to control the Sentinels at the same time, because then you've effectively got 5 heroes, and then it just gets quite manic. Okay, little technical fault there. My SD card ran out before I finished the review, so annoyingly I've now got to go back and do this last bit again. Technology, eh? I need to get myself some bigger memory cards. But anyway, as I was saying, the 5v5 mechanic in this is very enjoyable, but it is a harder mode to play. So you're going to have to bear that in mind, that this is not one for beginners. It is more for the experienced players rather than the sort of ones just starting off. And because of that, I can't recommend this expansion when you're just starting the game or when it's like your first one to get. This is still a fun expansion. I really like it. I am not disappointed. I enjoy the 5v5 team and I like the heroes that come with it. The environments, they're okay, but you know, the heroes are what sold this one for me as well as the 5v5 team. But the problem is, this is not a great one to get if you're just starting. So I would give my recommendation that you would want to, obviously after you've got the base set here, you would want to then go on to Rook City and Infernal Relics because that gives you a ton of cards, and with that and the base set you might already be set and not need any more. But then after that, if you still want to get more cards, then Shattered Timelines is very cheap and has some really cool villains in this deck, in this box. But the heroes are okay, they're not my favourites, but you know, the villains and environments are very cool and funky in this one. Then once you've got all those, or when you've got at least one of these two, then you can consider going on to Vengeance. Because by that point you'll be experienced enough with the game to handle 5v5 at a time, and you will have a good selection of heroes and environments in order to fight them with. So, you know, I mean, if you fight them with all 5 of their nemesis, like the Freedom 5 versus the Vengeful 5 as they're called in this game, then it's just an utter bloodbath because you've just got that extra damage going back and forth across the place, and it's just a massive battle, really epic. It's probably the most fun one I've had actually, is actually using the Freedom 5 versus the Vengeful 5. Very thematic, works great as a game. But like I said, this one, not necessarily the one that I would get for beginners, and certainly not one of the first expansions you should get. This is more of a completionist thing, so, you know, get it last, get it maybe after one of these two. Some people like to get Shattered Timelines first before Rook City and Infernal Relics. That's fine, different strokes. I personally prefer to get the bigger one first, but they're both solid, so no problems with that. But I still think that you should get at least one of those first before you get this. I don't see why you would want to get the base game and then get this one. So in general, that's my wrap up of Sentinels of the Multiverse. Like I say, I love this game, and this expansion is still a good one, just not an essential one. And, you know, when it comes around to doing my top 10 best games, which will be coming up soon later this summer, when it reaches like the anniversary of the blog, this is a strong contender to be in my top 10. I'm not giving out spoilers, but I'm just saying this is a strong contender. I really enjoy this game, and I would be surprised if I can think of 10 games that are better than this. So, you know, this is one of my favourites, and the expansions just get better and better. I hope they continue bringing out more expansions for this, because I will get them, not a problem. I know that they're bringing out that Sentinels of the Multiverse sort of board game that's coming out. It was too expensive to kickstart because it was pretty much like US only, and miniature ones are always expensive to kickstart, and I'm still a bit of a newbie on Kickstarter at the moment. So I'm going to leave that one until it gets released and see what that's like, but no doubt I will want to play it, possibly buy it, and obviously I'll get a review at that point. So that's it for me. That's Sentinels of the Multiverse Vengeance. I'll see you on the next review of the Broken Meeple. Goodbye.
Cthulhu will get you!